My colleague and friend Helen Adrienne has helped so many people with it, and so she's going to talk all about her book, and I want to read her introduction so that I make sure that I don't leave anything out, because she's an amazing person. Helen Adrienne has been a psychotherapist in private practice since 1979. Holy cow. And although she's a general therapist, she's specialized in working with men, women, and couples who struggle with infertility. Helen is trained in mind-body therapy and clinical hypnotherapy and conducts mind-body stress reduction classes at NYU Fertility Center. Her book, On Fertile Ground, Healing Infertility, with the most beautiful cover on a book I've ever seen. In a minute, I'll hold it up for you later. It was launched as the #1 bestseller on Amazon, and it's still available there. She educates mental health professionals on the parameters of infertility at national and international conferences, and she's authored many, many articles on infertility. You can participate in her blog, The Baby Manifesto, which I love the name of that. I love the name of that. On her website and her blog at Psychology Today. And Helen has literally helped thousands of people to navigate the emotional roller coaster of infertility, and she loves working with people dealing with almost any issue. So thank you so much, Helen, for being here. I'm thrilled to introduce you, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say, because this is such an important and emotional issue for so many people.
Well, I'm delighted to have been invited, Chris. Thank you so much. And my heart is in this work. I can't tell you what a thrill it is for me to be able to facilitate people in, basically, if you sum it up, stress reduction, because struggling with infertility is morning, noon, and night feeling stressed. And the techniques that I have and the years of experience that I have gives me such a thrill when somebody can feel better in their own skin and then get to their goal. So thank you for giving me this forum, because it's such an important and underappreciated phenomenon. And especially this week. This is National Infertility Awareness Week, so it's even better that I'm on now.
Since I, too, am a trauma therapist, and I was really interested to understand that you see infertility as a trauma, and that totally makes sense to me, but I would love for you to explain that a little bit more, because I think maybe people don't necessarily associate that with profound trauma.
Well, the way I conceptualize it is that it is a biological, psychological, social, and spiritual crisis. That you go to bed with this at night and you wake up with it in the morning, and women live in their underwear. I'm sure anybody who might be in this audience will understand in a second what I mean by that. Medical treatment and the prospect of surgery in some cases. Psychologically, the list is also quite long, because now they're dealing with suddenly a pail of cold water in their face, which we could just simply call change. Life is unrecognizable as it had been. And I've never met a person who hasn't felt out of control. Self-esteem flies right out the window. People feel impatient, insecure, angry, negative, and afraid. There's a tendency to kind of hide the feeling of blaming the partner who is diagnosed with the problem. It's just somebody that you love. It's not anything that was, done on purpose. But still, if you're normal, you're going to have that thought. And even worse is when there's no diagnosis. Privacy is lost. Everybody else that they know goes into their bedroom, closes the door, jumps into bed, and comes out pregnant. And they are on a gurney with their feet in stirrups, for much of their life. Mood swings from the drugs. Every month is a death when a woman gets her period. Anxiety and depression go with the territory. There's no way around that. And, just things like worried about money and jobs. I mean, the treatment is very expensive. Socially, these people are out of the mainstream. They feel isolated. Wherever they look, there are babies. There is no protocol. So, if someone dies, to say, I'm sorry to hear of your loss, to go to a wake or a shiva. Everybody says the wrong thing to people who are struggling with infertility, it seems. How do you socialize when you're not in the mood to be with your pregnant friend? And who do you share this with? And issues with family, in-laws and outlaws, and all the cast of characters. And then spiritually, you can just sum it up by saying, why me? The old, what am I, Job kind of a sensation. And then if you go along, there are some moral issues that come up if you become pregnant with multiples, and there's a danger to that. There's such a thing as reduction. This is not a pretty picture, and it's part of what people face. There are so many decision points, and does the couple have compatible coping mechanisms? Most of the time, they have different coping mechanisms, and they have to learn a whole new way of being together. Often couples pull together, but if their coping mechanisms are at a certain level and they need more than what they have, so then that's where I come in, because I teach just about every coping mechanism known to man in the stress reduction classes. But you can see, this is an ordeal. And you would call it a trauma. The people who go through it are apt to call it a trauma as well.
Well, if you think about how much we grow up believing, most of us, many of us anyway, grow up believing that we're going to have children and that we want to have children. And some people want to have children more than anything in the world. And like you say, that's really an eye-opener to say that every time a woman has her period and doesn't have a pregnancy, that it's a kind of death. It must be just absolutely excruciatingly painful. I'm curious, because people struggle so much with what to say. You mentioned that, what to say, and I know when somebody dies, you struggle with what to say, and you don't know exactly how to handle it. Do you have any suggestions, since we're on this topic, do you have any suggestions of what people can say to someone in a sensitive way when they're struggling with infertility?
It's very complicated because this is such a private thing, and there are a couple of categories of people. One is the person who is comfortable with being open about just about anything, and they'll march around and say, we've been trying to have a baby and blah, 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 And there are others who think, this is none of anybody's business. It's bad enough I have to get a doctor involved here. So the question of what do you say when you may not know. If you know, then you're not sure that anybody wants to hear, how are you doing? So it's really, if somebody opens up to you and they're going through it, I think the best thing you can say is, I feel honored that you have let me in to the sanctity of your marriage, and I just want you to know that I'm here for you, but I think it best that you come to me, because I don't want to be, on your back. How did this IUI, intrauterine insemination, go? How did this in vitro fertilization go? have you found a sperm donor or an egg donor yet? When is your next cycle? I mean, people don't want to be assaulted with those kind of questions. So just to very gently let people know that you can listen when they need someone to listen to them. And that when they try to give advice, I mean, in my group the other night, I had women practically hopping out of their chair saying, why do they say relax, why do they say take a vacation and you'll get pregnant? Why are they telling me adopt and you'll get, I mean, have a drink and you'll get pregnant? It makes people crazy.
So you've written this incredible book. The book is called On Fertile Ground: Healing Infertility, and it's just an incredibly beautiful and incredibly helpful book. So, I mean, can you just tell a bit about the book and how you came to write it? And I know that it's very different from all the other infertility related books out on the market. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit. I mean, it's a fabulous book, and I'm going to write the name of it and your website down below for anybody who wants to look at that right now.
I started writing for an online infertility organization called Inside, INCIID.org. After I had written my first article in 1990 and people were responding very favorably to it, I became a columnist for Inside, and I found that I enjoyed writing and that I enjoyed the commentary that was coming back to me by way of email, and the years went by, and by the time I realized that I had so much to say, the book practically wrote itself. And it was very interesting to be the person writing the book because I knew the issues really well. And then as I went along, I realized I was writing it for those who were struggling with infertility. But the more I stepped back from it in the editing process and whatnot, I realized that anybody who cared about an infertility spouse or friend would also benefit from understanding just what people go through. And then along the way, I began doing presentations at conferences teaching colleagues who were having patients coming in and struggling with infertility. So I started teaching them pretty much what it is that is like to be infertile and what the techniques were that were going to give the most relief. So then it occurred to me that those who serve the infertility population, therapists or reproductive endocrinologists, could also benefit from reading the book. But the kicker for me was at one point in time when I had the manuscript in not its final form, but close to a final form. I had given it to a few colleagues and friends, and one of my colleagues and I had scheduled a lunch meeting, and I was waiting outside the restaurant, and she comes galloping down the street, waving the manuscript in the air, and from 15 feet away she's saying, I am going to tell my friend Lisa about this book. I can't wait for it to come out. She's not infertile, but everything that you say in that book will help her with her issues. So the thing that, and the reviewers who wrote reviews for me were able to pick up on that as well. If you pull out the word infertility and put in any adversity that you're dealing with, there's advice on how these things impact you, how things that you're dealing with that are difficult, call them crises, call them traumas, whatever you want, how it impacts the couple, how it impacts the people in your world socially, and the end of every chapter has an exercise, a mind-body exercise that if you dedicate yourself to learning these exercises, you're going to get relief. And it's really about how you can dive under the turbulence of these things and not get swamped by them, whatever it is that you're dealing with, in this case, infertility.
I just have to read this thing that you wrote. It's great. It's when couples fail to conceive, the levels of physical and mental stress magnify each other and are so great that often their minds take off for distant planets as their bodies walk the earth like zombies. I'm laughing because that gives such a picture, and I'm sure that's exactly what it feels like. Oh my God! So yeah. So the other thing is that it sounds like, I mean, you mentioned that the process of all of this fertility, all the mechanics of trying to get pregnant and the medical stuff is very it's mechanical, whereas this is really an emotional and a heart issue. So I'm sure that you address that in your book. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, when you say that the mind takes off from Mars and the body walks the planet, basically my approach involves inviting the mind back into the body, right? So my website is called Mind Body Unity, and it's always been that way, despite the way that medicine took the body and the church took the mind, and it kind of hung out like that for centuries. But there's never been a division. And so the mind-body training that I have and the clinical hypnotherapy that I can provide for patients, there's no deeper connection to yourself, mind to body, body to mind, than when you're in a hypnotic trance. And so Chapter 7 is basically all about patients that I've worked with in detail, where I give the scripts that I worked with them on, and so anybody who reads Chapter 7 who's interested in hypnosis will really get a feeling of how user-friendly it is and how effective it is. The state of being in a trance is really it's safe, it's comfortable, it's relaxing, and the unconscious mind is activated. The conscious mind is invited to kind of sit on the sidelines and not judge. And my training as a hypnotherapist in how to talk to the unconscious mind really opens people up to getting beyond learned limitations and accepting post-hypnotic suggestions. So it's really, I think it's the greatest. And there was a study in 2006 that was published in Fertility and Sterility, which is the premier journal of reproductive endocrinologists. And what they did was they took two groups who were going through in vitro fertilization. One was the control group, and they just had standard treatment. The other group was the experimental group, and there was only one thing that was different from the control group, and that was at the time of embryo transfer, there was a hypnotic interlude that was delivered to people while the 5-day embryos were put back in the woman's uterus. And it turns out that the experimental group, the group that had hypnosis, had pregnancy rates that were double those of the controls. So it's just astounding how much relief people can get from mind-body exercises in general and hypnosis in particular.
Wow, that's amazing. So I'm curious. So obviously stress is a huge issue, and I guess once you have a pregnancy that doesn't happen, then you start to, I guess, most people expect to get pregnant relatively easily. So then I'm thinking, unless they know something ahead of time about some difficulty that they might have, but probably it's just sort of a natural human expectation to be able to get pregnant. So then once you have a difficulty with it, then I imagine you start to get scared, and then things tighten up, and your body, obviously our body reacts to that kind of fear. So obviously stress reduction is tremendously helpful. I'm curious, do you ever run into any situations where there's some sort of a hidden emotional belief that they're not entitled to have children, or that some belief that they can't have children, that gets resolved as a result of your hypnotic stuff?
Well, I guess the best way to answer that, I mean, you're asking questions that I could go on and on about, but to cut to the chase, people do expect to get pregnant relatively easily, although sometimes they don't. And that's a whole other story. When it doesn't happen, then the past, whether the past is just not conceiving, or whether the past is conceiving and miscarrying, the tendency to use the past to predict the future is what creates the ongoing stress, just as you said. You're raising the issue of, could there be an emotional block to conception? And, I like to use my most delicate techniques in that situation, because it's painful enough not to conceive. And the last thing that I want people to feel is that because they're not conceiving and I'm flirting with them at the idea of, what was your life like that might have, created some reason for your body to say no to a pregnancy, I know damn well they're going to fly instantly to feeling blamed. And if there's a process that's unconscious, then it's not about blame. It's about their life experience was what it was, and it may have manifested in a certain way. So I think what I'd like to do is just give one example so that people really get a sense of the potential to get beyond a block, right? I had a lady come into me who, before she was even sitting on the couch, was saying to me, "Is this my fault?" And I said to her, "Well, I don't like that question very much, but I'd like to know why you're framing it that way. What is it that makes you ask me that question?" And out tumbles this story of her childhood, where she peed in bed every night until she was 16, when the problem was diagnosed finally, and she had surgery, and that was the end of the problem. But in the meantime, she had a harsh and critical mother who, in one way or another, was saying, "Look what you're doing to me. Look at all the laundry you're creating for me. How dare you, da-da-da-da-da-da-da," right? And so I said one thing to her, one sentence. I said, "Are you afraid that you might be the kind of mother that you had?" She bust out crying. And from there, we were able to mitigate the impact of her childhood. And just by virtue of releasing it and then clarifying that if she knows what good mothering isn't, that sets her up really well to aim to do the opposite. And that these, mothering skills can be learned. And so, long story short, she conceived the next month.
Oh yes, it's quite a miracle for her, and it's amazing. I'm sure that there are people who have these beliefs I know for a fact that people have these beliefs, they're totally buried. And the good news is that once you find out what they are, then you can do something about it. The problem is when those beliefs are running things and you don't even know what's causing it. And there are treatments like yours, like hypnotherapy and all of the wonderful things that you do. And I work with EMDR and brain spotting and all these mind-body therapies that we have now that we didn't used to have. And so you can discover an unconscious belief, and obviously you're very sensitive. You nailed it right as soon as you nailed it right away. But then for her to be able to release that and have a shot, once you figure out what it is, to have a shot at it, and then to have things work out so beautifully. Well, lucky her, and thank goodness. And I'm sure you have a gazillion stories like that. And I just wanted to say that just to get back to the stress aspect of it, the stress aspect of it and the trauma aspect of it. What happens when you have a bad experience is that it gets stuck in your nervous system. If it doesn't get properly addressed, it gets stuck in your nervous system, so that this is what PTSD is made out of. If it doesn't get addressed, then the next time it happens, it just builds and builds and builds into a super duper really bad trauma with trauma reactions. And so if you can get in like you do apparently and deal with the stress from the beginning, then it doesn't have a chance to escalate into a really serious issue. So maybe you can talk about that, and I see we have a question.
Well, I will address that, and then I'd be most happy to take a question. What I want to say is that I had alluded before to the vast array of coping mechanisms that I not only teach at NYU with the stress reduction classes for infertility, but also I work with individuals, who come in privately. And there was another article in October of 2009 in Fertility and Sterility, which analyzed coping mechanisms in general and broke them down into two categories. They broke them down into problem solving and letting go. Problem solving coping and letting go coping. Problem-solving coping is pretty much what it sounds like. There's a problem, and then there's a solution that matches. So, I don't like my infertility doctor. I don't like the way the clinic treats me, blah, blah, blah. I go someplace else. Or I don't like what I heard. I'm getting another opinion, right? So it's problem-solution. And a lot of the behavioral techniques fall into that category. So I teach cognitive restructuring, where people are advised to pay attention to every time they say something negative and catch it, to catch the automatic negative thought. And then I have a whole technique, it's written up in my book, on how you can take a negative thought and transform it into a positive affirmation, right? But that's all in the category of problem-solving techniques. What this article did was it looked at letting go techniques. Letting go techniques are things like the relaxation response, certainly hypnosis, any kind of meditation, guided imagery, the kinds of techniques where you basically just allow yourself to be. Letting go and letting down, diving under the turbulence, finding an infertility-free zone in whatever way works for you. And hypnosis is top of the list as far as I'm concerned with that. But what they determined was that the letting go techniques have a positive correlation with rates of pregnancy. So, when you're dealing with a stress that visits you every day, 100 different times, you need more than one option for coping. And so one day you may find that doing a mindful walk, where you're just paying attention to the sensations and the soles of your feet, right? That gets your mind off whatever you're driving yourself crazy with, or whatever is intruding, because you're paying attention, you're being mindful to something, whether it's doing the relaxation response or hypnosis. I make hypnotic tapes for people. These are things that let the body balance from all the trauma that it's experiencing and move into a place of what I call neutrality, or aiming in the direction of neutrality, kind of more of the yin-yang kind of balance. And you have to be prepared, and not everybody is. They have to learn that here they are in the midst of having a job, the job of infertility, and now I'm coming along and suggesting that they have basically another job, which is to have an array of coping mechanisms and to be able to figure out what you need at any given moment and to make sure that you do it. So it's like, I'm not in the mood to study myself right now, but it can make all the difference in the world in terms of what it feels like to live inside your body.
Helen, I think you can see, if you look down below, there are some comments, and we have a question there if you want to take a look at that and address it. Can you see it?
I had 2 miscarriages at 6 and 8 weeks. The second miscarriage was due to chromosomal abnormalities, and then let's see, I have to move this in order to get the rest of the question. Next month I'll be doing IVF. What would be the best post-hypnotic suggestion that you recommend? Okay, so the math is laid out very nicely. That's, I think, Karen. And I would say that if you could presume that your body knows how to get pregnant, and that if you spend time visualizing going through 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 20 weeks, 25 weeks, why? Because the limbic system of the brain, which is where trauma lodges, and certainly having a miscarriage is a trauma in and of itself, the limbic system of the brain responds very well to visualizations, because the limbic system of the brain does not know that you are not where you imagine yourself to be. Okay, so let me say it again. The limbic system of your brain does not know that you're not 20 weeks pregnant, 25 weeks pregnant, 30 weeks pregnant. It doesn't know. So the more time you spend imagining yourself going through a pregnancy, the more your body will accept that as a reality. And so what would a post-hypnotic suggestion be? I am whole and healthy. My body knows how to be a woman. And once, the good news for you is that you had a determination of what the problem was. If you're going to have an IVF, they can determine with PDF, which is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, if there is an abnormality, and they can implant the embryos that are healthy. And so, especially if you know that what has been implanted is healthy, then I take the position with people that you may as well presume that it's going to go the way you want it to go, because you cannot protect yourself from disappointment. And it's much better for the mind-body to be in a place of, yes, I can, than it is to be, I'm going to have another, getting yourself into that place where your body is going to be saying, oh, well, why bother? This is only going to be another miscarriage. Because the hormonal system communicates, the brain sends out messenger molecules that go where the message is logical to go. And so, Karen, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope this answer has helped you.
Wow, that was a beautiful. Yeah, Karen, did you see her? She commented. Thank you very much. That's wonderful, Karen, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I hope you'll stick around. One of the things that I like to tell my clients, of course, I'm generally working with a very varied population of trauma survivors of one kind or another, but one of the things that we know about the brain is that the brain really doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. So, for example, if you look at an object, and they could do a brain scan, you would see certain areas of the brain light up. And then if you close your eyes and you imagine that same object and could have a brain scan, what you would find is the exact same areas of the brain light up. The exact same areas of the brain light up. So basically, the brain doesn't know the difference. That's why these affirmations and these visualizations are so powerful, because on some level, as far as the brain is concerned, it's actually happening. Whatever it is that you're imagining, if you do it fully, it's actually happening. And that's why nightmares feel so real when we're dreaming. It's because as far as the brain is concerned, it's really happening. As far as your body, it's telling your body to be terrified, and so it is, even though it's all presumably imaginary. So these visualizations have tremendous power. And I totally agree with you. Why not imagine beautiful things and positive things? Because, yes, we all think that if we just worry about things, that we'll be prepared for disappointment. But it never works. And in fact, it has a tendency then to make the disappointment worse, if not bring on the disappointment in some way, you know. So I know you agree.
I really like the way you said that. It's, you know, I sometimes get involved in doing a rendition of a layman's version of brain science, because I want people to understand, but the way you said it was so simple. It was perfect. It was perfect.
So I have a couple of other questions for you. I have a bazillion questions, but you mentioned that. Let me see. Well, we've covered just a little bit, but are there any specific things that you go after in terms of helping people understand what they must feel, which is, why me? Why has this happened to me? Is there anything that you automatically say, or can, you know, whatever?
Well, you're asking a question that touches on the connection or lack thereof that people have to their spirituality. Why me is right out of Job. You know, it's interesting. People come into this experience with enormous faith, and either their faith is enhanced or it is, you know, shot to smithereens. Conversely, people come in never having said one word to a higher power in any way, shape, or form. They realize what a miracle creating new life is, and it takes on a whole other dimension. And by the way, I am not at all talking about religion. I'm talking about connection, spiritual connection, having a sense that there's something greater than we are. And as far as the why, most people get down to business, I guess you could say. They want to know what they can do about it. and they get into doing, and it's very impressive what's required of people who are struggling with infertility and how much they manage to do. But again, there needs to be a balance with just letting yourself be. The thing that I'm constantly reminding people of is what used to make you laugh. Laughter is medicine. What did you used to do before you thought about having children? Go do it with your partner. Keep the fun in your life, keep the joy, keep the love especially in your life. And the challenge to keep the love in your life when your route to pregnancy is unnatural, so to speak. It's normal these days, but it's not natural. And when I work hypnotically with people, I've worked hypnotically with a couple, or I work hypnotically with a woman and I make an audio tape and I email it to her and she can load it on her iPod. I recommend that it's listened to with the husband or the partner, whoever the partner is, because I think it's important that even though in the case of in vitro fertilization that your embryos, your ovum rather, have been taken out and they've been fertilized in a petri dish and now they're downtown 5 miles from here, let's really take into consideration that you wouldn't be going through this if you didn't love each other. And so I do, in my hypnotic talk to the woman/couple, I always remind them about the love that's driving this, and that just the way you say the brain doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality, the little life that is microscopic is a future son or daughter, and I invite connection to the spirit of that, of what's growing in the petri dish. I connect heart, uterus, husband and wife or partners, and babies, and then talk about how those babies are going to come back into your body, and then there'll be a return to somewhat normalcy where you can really experience the growth of that child within you.
Yeah, did you see below what Terry wrote about having a light bulb moment last night about hypnosis? I've been doing it for years. I just didn't realize it. I was asking her if she wanted to explain that more, but it sounds like she had quite an epiphany. Okay. Okay. Can you see that? I thought I had some anxiety about it. What I had was a misunderstanding about hypnosis altogether. My husband wanted me to have a C-section under hypnosis, and it freaked me out. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, about hypnosis with surgery and so on.
Okay. Well, I just read the first comment, so let me give you my response. I didn't realize there was more below. The first thing I responded to was the light bulb moment. I had been doing it for years. I just didn't realize it. Trance is a natural state, right? We all go in and out of trance all day long. People who live in the suburbs and drive cars may be familiar with the term highway hypnosis, where you pull into a driveway and you say to yourself, how did I get here? Part of you was paying attention to the road, and another part of you was in some kind of daydream. And if you are involved enough, deeply enough in a daydream, then you can have dental surgery. People have all kinds of things in a hypnotic state. So the first thing I wanted to comment on is that trance is a natural state. And then if I move this down, I thought I had some anxiety about it. What I had was a misunderstanding about hypnosis altogether. Wait, I just lost that. So having a C-section under hypnosis, I don't recommend that unless you are really, really skilled, meaning that you've been a hypnotic subject or you've worked with self-hypnosis for a long time and you trust your capacity to dissociate to that degree. But I will say that that those who have hypnosis prior to any surgery usually can be counted upon to have less bleeding and a quicker recovery, because those are post-hypnotic suggestions that the body takes on. And I like to give this little example just so people understand what a post-hypnotic suggestion is, or the power of a post-hypnotic suggestion. I had a woman come into me a couple of years ago who was referred for pain. She had something going on in her knee and it was driving her crazy, and she thought that hypnosis would help her. And so I did an interview. I found out what the situation was, who she was, what she would respond to best in hypnosis, and then we worked together in trance. And I said all of the things, besides getting her to a relaxed place and finding out where in nature she is most comfortable and relaxed, and that would afford me the ability to use her imagery to deepen the trance. That's what I would, that's how I would narrow her focus, by using imagery that has meaning to her, which I did. And then I delivered post-hypnotic suggestions about how the muscles around her knee could relax and there would be less of a pull and blah, 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 whatever I said. I don't remember exactly. And then in the middle of that, I tossed in something to the effect of, and as the week goes by and you begin to feel more and more relief of this discomfort in your knee, you may notice that your left pinky finger will tingle. And then I, finished the hypnotic experience with her, and off she went. Chris is laughing. Okay, so she comes back the next week, and I say to her, hey, how'd it go? She said, oh my goodness, what a difference. My knee is so much better. She said, I don't know, but my left pinky was driving me crazy. She didn't remember I had given her that suggestion. What I was really doing was giving her an option, giving her mind an option to put its attention elsewhere. And that's exactly what happened.
That is very, very cool. Okay, so can you give us some buzzwords, the buzzwords for changing your response to stress? Because I know that stress is this is a huge deal. The stress that our body feels. So it sounds like you have some tricks or some shortcuts or something.
Well, I wish I had that kind of good news. I have tricks, but they're not necessarily shortcuts. They can be, and I prove this in my groups. I invite people to do a body scan, just noticing what it is that's going on head to toe or toe to head. Is there any place where there's a kink? Is there any place that's uncomfortable or anything, whatever it is. And then I invite them to take a generous inhalation followed by a slow, deliberate exhalation. And then I ask them to do a body scan again. And I would say somewhere upwards of 90% of the people feel different because they've taken one breath. And so that is something to keep in mind. And some of the letting go techniques, breathing techniques, you can create breathing techniques by just counting. Breathe into the count of 4, hold your breath to the count of 5, breathe out to the count of 6, switch the numbers around. It doesn't really matter. What you're doing is focusing. You're narrowing your focus to what is one of the gifts from God. It's a built-in tranquilizer. The breath is a built-in tranquilizer. The other side of that question, Chris, is a little bit more complicated, because let's say that you're a type A personality, or let's say you're not a type A personality, you're a type B personality, but you live in 2012, which is, like everybody's multitasking, and you're surrounded by, come on, get it done, do this, do that, do the other thing. So your experience of being you, let's I don't know if you can see this. This is your experience of being you in a vector, right? And then you decide that you want to be you in a different way. You want to learn the letting go techniques. You want to take your life in a different direction, right? But you've been you in this way for X number of years. And we all like to wake up on Tuesday the same person who went to sleep on Monday, right? So there's going to be all this buzzing, right? That's basically saying, in not so many words, and where do you think you're going? How dare you? Zoom. Get over here. Get back over here. And so in order to effect a change, you have to be prepared to understand that it is normal to be resistant to any change that you want to make. And yet there is so much at stake with fertility that if you have the mental muscle, or if you can develop the mental muscle to learn these techniques, to practice them, to have a whole array at your disposal, so that if one doesn't work on any given day, I'm going to do the relaxation response, and you find yourself really nudgy, then that would be the time to reach for a guided imagery tape. They're all over, they're on Amazon. You can just plug in guided imagery - infertility, and a bunch of them will pop up. I created one to go with the relaxation response that I teach at the end of chapter 1. So there are a dime a dozen. But the point is that the more options you have, and the more determination you have to exercise good self-care. That's the key words, good self-care. Your responsibility for shifting your body state to a place where the physiology of stress is reversed. That's something that everybody wants it the easy way, but you're not about to take Valium or something that might to you feel easy. It's much more important that you feel empowered. That's a big word in my lexicon. I really want people to feel that if I teach the relaxation response in a certain way and it doesn't work for you, then tell me, and I'll teach you in a different way, because I want you to feel that you can succeed in taking good care of yourself. And that, yes, you'll have days that are easier and days that are harder, but if you can say, look, I'm not having a good day right now, what will work? Then it becomes something that 5 minutes of breathing, or 15 minutes of yoga, or learning self-hypnosis, which I also teach in the book. You have all of these tools that you can use.
It makes me think of we're starting to know a little bit more about the brain, and of course neuroplasticity is the hot thing right now. That the understanding that our brains can change, that they are plastic, so to speak. Whatever, that seems like a very odd name, but neuroplasticity means that we can change the way we think, and that flexibility is maintained all the way until we're dead. That up until the end of our lives, we can still change. So there's starting now to be some real treatments that are brain oriented for example, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, where you can't stop your thoughts, where you're obsessing over some thought, or you have to check whether you lock the door 1,000 times. There's lots of different versions of that. But based on what we're beginning to understand about the brain, is that much of that is actually a habit, a brain habit. It's a brain thing. It's a brain thing because it's sort of like the circuits. It's like a groove, a loop. And the more you go on that loop, just like the more you go on a certain path, the bigger the path gets and the deeper the groove gets, so that every time you think about something in a particular way, it goes down that road, down that groove, and instead there might be another pathway over here, for example. I mean, this is a vast oversimplification, that would be more useful and is just as available but has never been used. And so the brain doesn't go that way, it goes this way. So one of the things that you can do when you notice yourself having an obsessional thought, for example, is to say, oh, there my brain goes again. It's a brain thing. It's my brain is doing this. It's not me. There's not something wrong with me. Usually these things are there for a good reason. They just don't work anymore. So, but to take a step back and say, oh, there it goes again. It's telling me the wrong information, and it's a brain thing. That's one thing to do to get some distance from it, because as long as you're thinking about the thought, you're not having the thought. You know what I mean? You're thinking about the thought, which gives you some distance. And then as soon as you can, then try to switch your attention over to something much more positive. Think about something that automatically makes you feel happy or contented, something that makes you happy, thinking about being with your children, or in this case, I guess that wouldn't be a good one. But thinking about someone in your family that you love, or some activity that you love doing, anything to switch your attention. And like you say, all of these, there are so many tools now that are available. So anyway, blah, blah, it sounds like this is very related to what you're talking about. And the idea of being able to make a new groove over here that's much more supportive can be really helpful in any kind of trauma. And this has to be one of the worst traumas there is on some level.
Okay, so we're back to this, right? I'm going to say it a little bit differently than Chris said it. This is the superhighway where the obsessive thought has free rein. It can go 80 miles an hour. And this is a little path, a little footpath that, at first it's just about tamping down the grass and creating, getting down to the dirt. But the more you travel this path, the more this one grows weeds, and this becomes the superhighway, right? And it takes determination, it takes focus, it takes practice. I mean, practice. You really have to practice. I find that I've seen fertility patients come in. Years ago, I used to say it this way: if you told a fertility patient to stand on an ice floe in Albany naked and float down the Hudson River to New York City, they would do it, right? Because there is so much emotionalism and so much at stake with wanting to create the next generation. Now I've seen people who have abandoned all of the food habits. They no longer meet their friends for happy hour. There's no alcohol. There's no tuna fish. There's certain cheeses you can't. I mean, they get nutritional counseling and they follow it like there's no tomorrow. So I may have made it sound like this is a tragedy, you have to do all these things that you don't want to do. Those things take less meaning when the motivation to do what you need to do to make things happen is as strong as it is with wanting a child. Okay, I see.
Yeah, I see. You see that you have a question.
Yeah, why did I decide to focus on infertility patients? I didn't. My intent when I went to graduate school, which I did when I already had my 3 daughters. They were little, and because I had 3 children and a miscarriage, I knew what it was like to be a patient in the OBGYN world. And I knew that there was something radical that was missing, which I write about in the preface to my book. So I connected with a gynecologist. I opened my office in a gynecology office, and I was seeing everything. I was seeing premenstrual syndrome, I was seeing menopause, I was seeing miscarriage, I was seeing, just people who were unhappy for one reason or another. But I was one of 2 people who were focused at all on infertility, and as the years went by, more and more patients were coming in, and I have to say they taught me everything that they needed me to know in order to serve them well. And so from one of 2 fertility counselors in all of New York City in 1979 and 0 fertility counselors other than me in Rockland County, where I also had a practice, this thing just grew and grew and grew, and I realized, based on what people were telling me they needed, that I could formulate a kind of a scaffolding that made it easier and gave some relief to patients. And then, as I said before, I began publishing various articles. As my training and skill increased, I felt that I had more to offer, and I've never been sorry. I get enormous pleasure from my work. I really do.
I can imagine how much pleasure you must get from it. It must be just an incredible gift to be able to help somebody struggling with this painful and challenging issue. And I was thinking about how it really is hard. It's hard work. It's very challenging what you're asking, suggesting that people do when they're in this situation. It's basically breaking a lot of habits, for one thing, just in terms of trying to learn new ways of thinking about what's going on and dealing with the stress of everything that's going on. And I'm just wondering if there's anything, beautiful comment below, if there's any good news about all of this, because obviously struggle and adversity, I'm sure you have some thoughts about that based on what you've found.
Well, first of all, Terry, thank you for your lovely comment. I appreciate it very much. And what I like about the work that I do is that people get an opportunity to grow from adversity, and that's really the angle from which I wrote my book. I interviewed upwards of 24 former either individual patients or group members, and I put my framework interspersed with their experiences, their commentary. And the question that I asked was, is there, and people thought I was nuts for asking this question, is there any way that your life is better because you were infertile? And when people thought about it, they said, wait a minute, yeah. And so one of the chapters is how they gained from the pain, is the way I put it. Basically, you have an opportunity to become a new, improved version of yourself. I don't know, for anyone out in the audience who is listening to this, how you're receiving it, because it's not an easy concept. You're struggling enough without having to think about studying yourself as another job. But the truth of the matter is that whether you're quick to anger, whether you tend to be impatient, whether you tend to be insecure, there are so many personality traits that sometimes make it difficult to be in relationships with people. And I have all kinds of self-exam kind of questionnaires in the book, so you get a chance to step back and look at who you are, and then use the mind-body techniques as a way of improving your interpersonal skills, and as a way of building your self-esteem, or building it back, because ordinarily it gets beaten to a pulp. And the final analysis is that you grow in all kinds of ways as an individual when you face adversity and purposefully decide to go after whatever it is that you need to make changes in your life. Certainly the mind-body techniques and the letting go techniques are ways of self-soothing, ways of stepping back from difficult situations which are not going to ever stop in our lives. It won't be infertility, but it'll certainly be something else. And you just feel better prepared to meet the challenges that life throws our way.
I'm curious, do you have any stories or anything about people who have made these discoveries that there was something positive about what went on? Does anything come to mind?
So the first thing that comes to mind is one of the little brief vignettes that I wrote up in my book about a woman who did succeed in having 2 in vitro fertilization children, but she found that even after having her children, whenever a friend would call and say, "I'm pregnant," she would fly into a rage. Why is it so easy for so-and-so, and it was so hard for me, and on and on and on. And she got a phone call like that, and her husband happened to be standing there. And so she goes off on this, rage, and he says to her, "I'm not sorry." She said, "I thought he had lost his mind." And it stopped her in her tracks. And, as her mouth hung open, she didn't know did she want to hit her husband? I mean, she didn't know what to do. But her mouth hung open, and he said to her, "Honey, if we didn't have the problems that we had, we wouldn't have her, and we wouldn't have him. The perfect children for us." And then she said, "That shut me up, but good. Everything changed after that." It's just a small story, but the ability, whatever it is that there's whenever there's an aha moment, whatever it is that brings on an aha moment, it's something that can be built upon. So, for instance, this woman said, never again did she feel anything but, "Good for you, you're pregnant." And I have my family, I have my husband, isn't this great? We're both going to be, I'm a parent, you're going to be a parent, or, you're having a second child now, it's wonderful, I'm happy for you. So all of that venom came out of her system.
Just like that. I'm imagining also that oftentimes it's the adversity in a marriage that brings you together and makes your marriage stronger. Not always, but if it's basically a good marriage, and two people who are committed to one another and love each other, then going through something like this can be an incredible experience, I imagine. That no matter how it turns out, there might be the possibility that at least there's that intimacy and closeness from having supported one another and going through something.
I'm glad you asked that question or made that comment, Chris, because on the one hand it's true. It's an opportunity to really build intimacy in the most profound way. But conversely, it will throw into high relief the places where the marriage isn't working so well. And actually, chapter 3 of my book, I'm particularly pleased with that chapter because I had permission from a couple to write up their story, where the relationship was very dysfunctional, so much so that in their first session they were carrying on so that he got up and ran out of the room. And in the course of time between that first session and the end of the story, they completely transformed their marriage. I just felt so privileged to be a part of that process. And the end of the story is that their son is probably 2.5 by now. So, this is where crisis of any kind also has built into it opportunity. And this couple had an opportunity to repair what was not their fault. They each inherited a type of style of being in a marriage that fit together like hand and glove, but boxing glove was more like the kind of glove they were wearing. And they learned to travel. They learned to take the back roads, not travel the superhighway where the brain was telling them to go. And they built a whole new communication system. And in fact, they both said to me along the way, I know that not only the difficulty in conceiving, but the miscarriage that she had was a blessing, because to bring a child into the kind of relationship that they had would have been, just dreadful for the child. And they were relieved that they could now, show their son the kind of loving home that he deserved.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, that's an incredible example of how the back roads can be good. Sometimes the superhighway is great, and sometimes it's not so bad to go, the back roads where, we can go on with this metaphor where the flowers bloom and where you actually see stuff, whereas you're whizzing by in your life on the superhighway, and sometimes you really want to do that. And sometimes you don't necessarily know what's good for you when you're in it. But events occur that sort of force you to do things that you wouldn't normally do, and sometimes that can be a great thing. So amazing. I could listen to your stories for hours. I think we probably should wrap this up now. So I just want to check in with you and see if there's anything else you want to add or that feels important to say, and just kind of talk.
I think the thing that I would most like to say in conclusion is that there can be an incredible feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction. You weren't handed this. You you were handed this. You didn't ask for it, and to learn how to meet it with dignity and grace, to learn how to appreciate each other in spite of not having what you want when you want it, and to be willing to open yourselves up to the things that have nothing to do with the blessings, really, of modern medicine. I mean, it's completely mind-boggling what modern medicine is capable of. But there's nobody that none of the doctors and nurses and whatnot go home with you, and learning how to be you in a different way is really the bless in the mess. But in the meantime, the journey is arduous, and I just want to take a moment to wish whomever it is that's in the audience the best of luck, and thank you for attending, and I hope that that what you have heard has inspired you to feel that you can get through this in a good way.
Do you want to? Why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you? And in the meantime, I'm going to hold up your beautiful book. It's around here somewhere. But maybe just I've written a couple of times the name of your website, but maybe just talk a little bit about being in touch, and I'll get your book in.
Okay. My telephone number is area code 212-758-0125. 212-758-0125. And you can email me at Helen, Helen, at mind, MIND, dash, body, BOD. Okay, I'll start again. The email address is Helen, Helen, at mind, MIND, dash, body, BODY, dash, unity, UNITY.com. And thank you, Terry, for your commentary. It's a pleasure seeing your face as well.